The NBA is holding the rest of the season, which was ruined by the pandemic that hit the US known as COVID-19 at Disney World. 3 months ago, any of us NBA fans would have never even conceived it, let alone have to embrace it. But with revenues being lost like none other, Adam Silver and his team had no choice but to resume the season at all costs. And Disney, one of the NBA's premier business partners, as owners of ESPN and home to the NBA experience in Disney Springs, was the preferred partner. They've had so much influence already that the longtime CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, was able to speak at a conference call concerning the resumption of the season in late May. And that's when they were still deciding on what location they wanted it to be. So yeah, pretty big influence. With a viral epidemic that requires for people to just be talking to spread, to operate a large-scale indoor sporting league for the rest of the world to see, with hundreds of players and millions of viewers, the entire plan revolves around minimizing risk. The best way to do that realistically, of course, is by keeping the safe people safe, by keeping the outside sources out. Given that the NBA has over 24 teams which travel across the country to play against each other, the only option was to cut off the travel to make sure that the player wouldn't get the disease while they were on the road or in the airports or from a flagpole. Now, how do you cut off travel, make sure that you're monitoring everyone's statuses, and have enough space to practice social distancing as humanly possible? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the great bubble of Disney. Disney World, in hindsight, was the only place where the NBA could logically hold their NBA season. For starters, it's a place that can comfortably hold 1,500 people at one time. When you have roughly 300 players and roughly 300 to 500 people beyond the players simply for basketball alone, then you have issues. The required venue needed to have at least 3 things. 1, of course, the amount of space. 2, multiple courts at a time. And 3, national television broadcast capabilities. The 2 final competitors that were decided on was Las Vegas, the host of the Summer League, and Disney World's Wide World of Sports, which also holds national AAU tournaments, which are televised. Beyond just the venue, there needed to be a compliant and relatively safe central government which was willing to host a large-scale sporting event like this one, even if that does mean bringing hundreds of people from across the country to your state. Again, the 2 frontrunners, Florida and Nevada, had governors that were already dedicated to economic revival and were ready and willing to host sports, even up to the point of encouragement. But what Florida had that Nevada didn't was, of course, Disney. Disney World is the largest private entity in the country, which basically means that they hold the most amount of space that belongs to a single company that's not a government. Las Vegas and Houston was actually also on the list as well. Las Vegas and Houston are cities, both ran by governments that don't have a lot of flexibility, essentially. Whereas with Disney World, you have roughly 10 people as opposed to, let's say, 50. Which makes sectioning off places from people a lot more easier. For example, Disney has cut off that entire section of where the NBA players are for the NBA players alone. So the players get to enjoy the NBA experience at Disney Springs, the Animal Kingdom at Disney World, and the Africa Safari ride. All while the normal customers of Disney World are essentially cut off. You're not able to do that in another city of like Houston or Las Vegas, where you cut off an entire section of a city. But with Disney World's 19 square miles, it's essentially like a city, but it's completely operable. And of course, they have enough hotel and dining space to accommodate players comfortably. If you guys haven't seen some of the amenities that they have, whew, man, it's a doozy for sure. They've got ping pong, they've got NBA 2K, they've got trails, they've got pools, they've got the life. But of course, they have to be stuck there for roughly 3 months before they can even see their family again, which is, of course, a huge downside. For those of you guys who are thinking that it's going to be all that great, I don't believe that it will, personally. But that's beyond the point. For those of you that don't necessarily remember how it's going to look like, for the first 1 to 2 weeks, one of the first phases, the NBA players all come back from wherever they're at, like for Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic coming back from Europe to practice for 1 to 2 weeks within quarantine. And then from there, they're sent to the primary location in Orlando, Florida. Except for the Toronto Raptors, which came early to Orlando due to border issues with Canada and the United States. So from there, the teams practice in self-quarantine for another 1 to 2 weeks, and that's when they officially get into games. Disney World has provided the NBA 3 courts, 2 of them used for national television, meaning that there are going to be 3 games on simultaneously in the Disney World's different facilities, at a maximum of 7 games per day. To make sure that the safe people are, of course, still safe, they'll have daily tests, as proposed by health professionals across the country. It's estimated that they'll need roughly 15,000 of them. Behind the effort to create comfortable testing beyond the MP tests that are incredibly uncomfortable and quite cumbersome to administer, the folks at the Yale School of Public Health are partnering with the NBA to create a non-invasive, mostly accurate, quick test. Hopefully, I'll be speaking to them later next month, if everything goes okay, fingers crossed. We'll see. So with that partnership, the NBA has cleared the first hurdle of NBA players' complaints of the very uncomfortable tests. They're enough to bring grown men to tears. I wouldn't want to be on the end of one of them. In fact, if you guys don't know how it's like, they take the device, I suppose you could call it. It's essentially a stick that has a detecting device on the other end, and they stick it through your nose, and they stick it all the way through. Pretend my finger is the thing, right? They stick it all the way through to roughly back there. They have to swirl it a little bit, and then they have to keep it there for a few seconds, and then they take it out. So, according to Jailer Dudley, it feels like it's touching your brain. Not a good feeling to have, clearly. So, they've got the comfort covered, but there is also the issue of optics. If you guys remember, the Utah Jazz and the NBA as a whole was looked very poorly upon for taking the Oklahoma City tests while they weren't readily available. They were able to test some 50 people, I believe, and made national news. Since then, the United States has been able to catch up in the number of testing that's necessary, so it's not that big of a deal anymore. Then another issue that the NBA has to worry about for this season is the safe players going out into unsafe environments.
Here's the reason you gotta be worried. I wanted to hold off on saying this, y'all, but I can't hold it no more. The only point that I'm trying to make here is you asking dudes to go weeks.
No.
Without. And I'm just saying, that's
hey, Molly.
a challenge.
So yeah, this clip came out today, so I couldn't reference it, but that's pretty much the best way that you could put it, low-key. According to protocol, there's supposed to be some sort of repercussions similar to some in-game altercation, which is stacked upon the immediate quarantine, where the players are subjected to the very uncomfortable test, and then have to stay in quarantine for 1 to 2 weeks, and it's treated as an injury, so the player isn't able to play and no play is stopped. So a bad look for sure, and they possibly get fined, or they have more severe discipline to that. Not very fun. The two features that we've heard about that are quite unique to this situation is, of course, the anonymous hotline, which basically snitches on players that are sneaking out to go other places, and the smart rings that they're wearing that apparently are able to detect the symptoms of the virus 2 to 3 days in advance, which of course would be very beneficial to the league at whole. But even with those precautions, this is still very risky. Basketball is a sport that's played indoors, and indoors is where the coronavirus loves to thrive. Of most of, if not all of the major outbreaks that have occurred within the United States, they occurred indoors. And basketball is one of those sports. It's not like soccer or baseball. You're up close and personal with your competition, meaning that you're breathing in their spit droplets, you're feeling their sweats, and all of these other things. All things that the coronavirus thrives on. The amount of people they're expecting to be there clocks in at about 35 people per team, meaning that there's going to be at least 770 individuals there for purely basketball operations. And at the very maximum, over 1,000. And that doesn't include any of the other things. That doesn't even include the broadcast crew, or the referees, or the families, or the most dreaded of all, the hotel workers. The precautions that are being taken right now vastly differ than what they're expecting for there to be in a month. At the moment, Toronto, the only team in Orlando right now, of course besides the Magic, are practicing with 1 player per court with 2 balls and 2 trainers for 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's what they're doing. There's no contact between any of the other teammates or anything like that. You go in and you go out. For them to ramp that up to be within a month to full 5-on-5 play against different teams on national television, well, that's a cause to worry. Then there's the issues with social distancing, which they said that they're going to try and fix with the smart rings that are apparently supposed to beep if you get within 6 feet of one another. But how well will that actually be able to be upkept?
You really think they honoring a bubble for 3 months and are going to deprive? Somebody got to tell the truth.
The really big question here is, how is this going to scale? That's something that the NBA is definitely worried about. It's something we as fans should be worried about too, and we as citizens of the United States and even of other countries should be worried about as well. The thing about this is that the slightest mess up could turn into a catastrophe easily. Simply apprehending a positive case for 1 to 2 weeks likely isn't enough. There's the people and services that they've been in contact with while having the virus. There's the words that they've spoken into the air. There's so many other different factors that are so difficult to track, and you can't fix that by solely quarantine. If a large swath of players are taken out due to the virus, then that has very huge implications for not only competitive wise, but for the optics at hand. If a positive case has been discovered, it might pass to a crew member, a teammate, a family member, leaving everybody in fear. And also the nation as well. I mean, 16 players have already contracted the virus, and they haven't even been to Orlando yet. The NBA is walking a very thin line between the right and the wrong side of history. If they teeter towards the wrong side, then that could add catastrophe for not only now, but for years in the future. And the worst thing about it even is that even if the NBA gets through Disney World somehow, they're still not in the clear in the slightest. When the next season opens up in December, likely Christmas, the second wave of coronavirus will be coming along full steam, along with the United States influenza pandemic that comes through every year. With those two viruses going around, the NBA will have to seriously consider if they can hold games safely in their own arenas. I mean, we don't know yet. There hasn't been much talk about that, and of course for good reason, because the NBA is very preoccupied with this current season at hand. But we might see another bubble for the 2021 season, which of course none of us would really want to see. The risk of traveling cross country for day after day after day for months and months poses a very serious risk. If positive cases arrive again and even claim the life of perhaps one of the older NBA members, how will that be seen? The coronavirus vaccine at best is 6 months away from now, if not far more than that, but there's still basketball and revenue to be made. The NBA typically brings in roughly $1.4 billion due to ticket sales, and due to next season already decided essentially as not having any fans, and of course this season being cut short as well, and even when that season ends, then what happens from there? How will the NBA recover from such an economic hit? There are so many unknowns, and we have no clue, and Adam Silver and his crew have no idea either. It's a lot of unknowns out there with a pandemic that we've experienced once only in our lifetimes, and the professional sports leagues are still reeling to try and get a hold of it somehow, which is far easier said than done. As time goes past and more worries are spread, a communal celebration through the guise of sports is more and more integral to not only the United States, but the entire world. The NBA, at the forefront of the global scale, only behind soccer at this point, need to get things right. Adam Silver is probably in the toughest spot as a commissioner since the days of the tape delay, but he has to pull through. But the difference here is that what he does sets the tone for an entire country. That's a lot of pressure. Let's just hope that he can keep this thing on the rails while making sure that the players and personnel are safe and keeping us entertained. It's a tall order, but if anyone can do it, I'd trust Adam Silver. Even with that though, we've never seen such a peculiar situation like this one. We'll see if they pull it off. Thanks for watching. How you like Mickey, by the way?